Satnam listeners, and welcome to another Conscious Conversation with Tiaga Prem. Welcome, Tiaga Prem, to another episode. How are you today?
Beautiful. It's a heat wave here in Vancouver.
It sure is. It's a hot one, but we got some shade here inside the Dharma Temple. We're hanging out, and as always with everyone here on the Instagram Live, thank you everyone for tuning in. Let's just jump right into it today. The topic of the day is spiritual activism. I think you should lead us through this, give us some scope. What are we really talking about today?
Yeah, definitely. So we're living in a time right now where you see a lot of people standing up for beneficial causes, for feminism and for animal rights and for environmentalism and for against prejudice and for unity or whatever you want to call it, political issues. Like, it is a time of, and not to mention, the potential for war and destruction and violence. And there's just a lot going on. And we can see that this really is the time where it's essential that we step up as activists. But it's also essential to recognize, especially the people like us who have these technologies, to view activism through the lens of the spirit. And what that means is, you'll notice that if we approach activist practices like, the marches and the coming together as one in groups to really let our voice be heard, that's a great thing. And we, of course, have these incredible tools like social media to connect with the world. But it's incredibly important and essential, as you've learned from listening to these past programs, that we can't just approach it from the head. If we just approach it from the head brain, which exists in two dimensions, then there's always going to be an us versus them. And if there's always an us versus them, it's going to create some pretty serious friction. That's just the nature of the two-dimensional brain. And that's not saying that somebody isn't wrong and somebody isn't right. It's deeper than that. We need to look beyond the surface of, why are people behaving the way they're behaving? Why do we have this divisiveness? And the only way to do that is to go beyond the intellect. And the intellect is necessary and it's important, like we've spoken about in previous episodes. But we want to look at life through the lens of the spirit, where we can see the oneness in everything. We can see the oneness in somebody who's in pain. We can see the oneness in somebody who's inflicting pain on others. We can see the oneness in somebody who's taking great strides to bring people together. The idea is to see it everywhere. And that's why we call it spiritual activism, because we want to apply that to the activism of the head brain, not leave the head brain out there on its own. Because I don't know about you, but I've been caught up in the moment. Like, I've got an incredible sense of justice. I was born with that. Like, well, you went to law school. But like, if something is going on and somebody is being treated unfairly, my natural inclination is to step in and be like, hey, you can't do that. Which is a good thing. It's better than being like, oh, I don't want to get involved. But if you don't have any kind of practices that's helping you see beyond the initial reaction of emotion or the initial reaction of the sense of justice, you can get into a lot of trouble. And you can cause pain and suffering, even though it came from a very pure place, And that's what the spiritual activism is. That's what the skillful means of the Buddha is. That's what the if you can't see God in all, you can't see God at all teaching is. It's being able to see beyond the surface and operate effectively from that place.
So by naming this episode Spiritual Activism, are we saying we must have activism in our life? Or are we saying more that if we are to take an activist approach, that we should make it a spiritual one?
I think the best way to describe it is, if you look at the teachings of Krishna and Arjuna and Bhagavad Gita, for yogis, we go back to that conversation a lot. And we think about it as activism is action, and it's like, it's impossible for there to be no action. Like, even not doing anything, like if you see somebody who's being harmed and you don't get involved, that appears to be not doing anything, but you are doing something. You're choosing not to respond. That's an action, you know. So the teaching is that action is always there. There's no avoiding it. And then so it's like spiritual activism is like conscious action. You know, it's like everything you do becomes your practice. And now in these times, that's going to involve the way you connect with society as a whole. And that's why we're so clear on saying, like, you can't just hide in the ashram during this time. Don't just hide in the mountains. Don't just move out of the city and do your own thing, because we need people who are doing conscious action, who are working on their own stuff. Because ultimately it starts with you. I mean, it's like we all have all of this pain and suffering and experiences of karmas through our lives, you know, whether it was we were abused, or whether it was we were afraid to step out of our safety zone and do something like get a different job, or get out of the confines of our parents' expectations, or maybe you were sick, or I mean, there's all of these things that with these accumulated karmas, and we need people who have been through the fire, who've dealt with alcoholism, who've dealt with abuse, who've dealt with being a single parent, who've dealt with whatever it is, because we've all experienced it. This is a time where we've all experienced that kind of suffering, and do the practices to see through the conditions and know who you are in relationship to that, and then go out and serve. Because otherwise, it's a bunch of people saying, we're right and you're wrong, and this, we're going to win and you're going to lose, and where's that leading to? You know, it's like when you're a kid, you teach the kids to play the game and enjoy the game together, but ultimately, like, sportsmanship is the most important thing. Shake hands, take care of each other. It's just a game, like that kind of thing. Those things are very important, you know, and we emphasize them with children. Well, that's how I was raised. Maybe not everyone was raised like that, but my family raised me like that. And I was a competitive person. I liked sports, and I like to know everything about the bands, and I like to be caught up with what's going on. But if that's all that exists, somebody's got to win and somebody's got to lose, it's creating karmas at a rapid speed, and now we're living right in front of each other. We're living in each other's laps. And if we can't learn to see beyond the two-dimensional, somebody's right and somebody's wrong, it's going to cause a lot of big-time karmas for the collective consciousness. And that's why it's so key that we learn to see beyond that.
Definitely connecting on what you're saying, but I really think you should unpack this more as a mental process, because I feel this is one where you can make some really solid impact on someone who may be doing this at a very subconscious level, who may be seeing the pressure of the times and has a few heady, so you say, opinions or ideas of what is right and wrong, but then maybe there's not, I don't know, are you asking for follow through, or are you asking to see it in a different way? Like, how do people approach this when they do see an injustice, whether it's coming from media or in their local community? And then what is the proper approach ultimately going forward?
Well, that's a tough question to give like a uniform answer to.
Or maybe you can say then the common mistakes that people will make from a Piscean era, where it's like it's just too much of this repetitive nature that isn't really working.
Yeah, I can speak to that for sure. The difference is knowledge versus experience. You know, it's like we might know that, you know, it isn't right to deny people access to this country, or that the idea of borders is just like the idea of fences keeping people apart because I'm a this and you're a that is such an old way of thinking, and it's a knowledge-based thing. It's like, oh, okay, you're from this country, so this is what you eat, this is what you believe. You compartmentalize people based on knowledge, right? Like I may have mentioned before in a previous conversation that I had an ex whose father told her when she was a kid, she's of Asian descent, and her father told her when she was a child that you should never trust a person with red hair. That's like a real thing that she was told. And so she had that belief system in her mind, even though she was like being raised in a very multicultural Canadian experience where there was all kinds of different friends around, but she still had this in her mind, and it is like that's like a knowledge thing.
Right.
It's not like, you know, if she went to Scotland or somewhere where there's a lot of people with red hair and spend time with different people, then that would be experiential, and that knowledge or like alternative fact or whatever you want to call it now, it doesn't have any legs to stand on. It's two-dimensional. It's flat. You know what I mean? So that's Piscean knowledge. It's like you learn about something and it's almost like, think about what's happening now in our times with politics. People are treating opinions as facts. And knowledge will allow you to do that. Like our teacher Guru Singh, he said, if I was to tell you this is the best pickle, maybe we talked about this before, this is the best pickle that you'll ever have in your life. It is the world's greatest pickle. And some people try it and they go, yeah, it's true. This is the best pickle I've ever had. It's incredible. And then there's some other people in the room who go, well, wait a minute, I don't even like pickles. So there's a hole in the theory. Like, how do we know it's the best pickle? They don't even like pickles. Well, maybe there's a pickle that they would like. It opens up this whole thing. The knowledge part is flat. It's two-dimensional. It's the stereotypes. These kinds of people only do this. And we do it to ourselves. You know, I'm not that type of person. Oh, I could never do that. No, I'm not a morning person. Like, we compartmentalize things. And the brain wants to naturally do that. Like, put everything in its place. And it's a safety mechanism. It's so you feel safe. But we know that in nature, when does growth or evolution happen? It doesn't happen in safety, you know. It happens when it's like, this is crazy, you know, that moment when you're about to jump from the high diving board, or that moment you're about to go in front of a large group of people and speak about something that you're passionate about, or that moment, you know, that's where the growth comes from. So here we are in this time where we're so easily accessible with each other, and we've got all this knowledge. Piscean, right? Two-dimensional. Good, bad, right, wrong, love, fear, all of that. And so we're basing everything on opinions. And the interesting thing is, if you could get around people who, like, there's this great show on Vice called Hate Thy Neighbor. It's kind of a daunting title, but it's an amazing show to watch, because in it, this guy who's, I think he's maybe half Jamaican and half from somewhere in the Middle East. Big guy, looks like a Muslim guy. He's not a Muslim guy, but appears that way because he's got a big black beard. And he goes and spends time with extremist groups, you know, black power, white power. He goes to Israel and spends time with the Zionists, and it's a pretty intense show. But the interesting thing about the show is that, you know, in your mind, the two-dimensional part of your mind goes like, white power, that's not good. And it's true, right? Or black power, but it makes it three-dimensional, and it makes it a little bit like, oh, these are people who have children, and these are people who are teaching this to their children, and these are people, and we can't just compartmentalize them. We need to be the leader. We need to be the grown-up. We need to be the teacher. Because if we, like, imagine in school, if you just take the kids who are causing a disruption in the school, and you just pinpoint them as the bad ones, and you either just push them through and ignore them, or you just make their life terrible and miserable, what is that going to change? You know? And then that's what starts to happen in the whole realm of what's going on the planet right now. Is we go, oh, we don't want that, we don't like that, we don't want anything to do with that, keep it away from us, and we add to this division to I'm a this and you're a that. And yoga says that that doesn't exist, it's an illusion. There is no such thing as separation. You know, and our teacher Guru Singh has this great talk where he says, how many people here came to this talk in a blue car? Raise your hand. And a few people put up their hand. And he says, does it matter? And he goes, here we are with all of this incredible technology and all of this knowledge and all of this. I mean, according to the yogis, you've been all of those things. You've been a slave trader and a slave and a Muslim and a Jew and an atheist and a transgendered person who was persecuted and a child who was starving. And you've been it all, man. And if you can get past the two-dimensional somebody's right and somebody's wrong, you can feel it. And that's where compassion starts. And that's where the beginning of a spiritual awakening starts. That's where we spoke about the saint from the Sikh tradition who was feeding water to both sides. And everybody's like, you can't do that. That's not right. And it's not saying you just kind of like, oh, well, everybody's fine. It means you show up as the teacher and you give the lesson. And sometimes the lesson is really intense. And sometimes the lesson is very sweet, even though logically you shouldn't do that. There's a great story about Yogi Bhajan. Some kids broke into his estate and wrote graffiti on the walls of his estate. And they got caught. And they were writing some racial slurs or something about people who wear turbans or Indian people or whatever. And they got caught, and the police were saying to Yogi Bhajan, do you want to press charges? And he said, instead of pressing charges, what I'd like is they have to, in order to avoid a criminal record, they have to come to my home for supper. And the police are kind of like, okay, I guess. And so these young people come. I know I got arrested for graffiti when I was a kid. I know all about this. I would have been shocked if this happened. But I would have went rather than take the criminal record.
For sure.
Yeah. And so he rolled out the red carpet, like the royal treatment, incredible meal, the best food that you could get, waited on, what do you say, hand and knees? I'm trying to think of some expression, but the royal treatment for these guys. And then at the end of the meal, he gives them each $100. And some of the members of his staff are like, okay, Yogi-ji has officially lost his mind, because it isn't logical. But you know what happened after that dinner? They started coming to yoga class. They were so blown away, they were like, nobody has ever done that for me. And you think the slap on the wrist and the telling them that this is what you are was going to create any change? I mean, I can count the good. My daughter's starting school this week, and so we've been hesitant. Like, do we put her in the system? We've had a lot of talks about this, right? Totally. Yeah. Do we put her in the system? What do we do? Definitely, it's not always the answer. You have to pay attention to the child. And we've been on the fence. Oh, do we put her in public school? Do we not? Do we keep her home? Do we put her in outdoor school? Do we? What do we do? It's so important to us, And I can count the good school teachers that I had in my life from grades kindergarten to 12 on one hand. That's a lot of teachers in there, on one hand. But then I can tell you, of those teachers that I hold on this one hand, not a single one of them put me in the category of he's a troublemaker. Not one of them. They were like, one of them was like, oh, he's showing an interest in Buddhism. Maybe we should explore meditation. He's obviously a bright kid. Let's give him some non-conventional techniques to help him concentrate. I wouldn't be sitting here today if it wasn't for that. Another teacher saying if as long as he gets his work done and I keep giving him cool and interesting stuff to do, he doesn't bother anybody, rather than just putting me through the motions. These are great minds that are thinking how can I serve this person? But it required looking outside of knowledge, looking outside of the textbook, looking outside of, this is what I learned in university. It's experiential. You know, it's dynamic. It's not two-sided. And that's, I guess, where I'm going with all of this is that's the life of the spiritual activist. It's like, yeah, I see the right, wrong, good, bad, love, fear, all of that. I see it, I get it, I understand it. But let's just see if we go a little deeper. Let's try something different. Let's see if we can get to know this person. Let's see if we can bring some kindness into the face of upset or, you know. And I want you to be safe, obviously. But that's what the spiritual activist is. And if you look out at the world, you can see how easy it is to fall into the intellectual game.
So I guess I made the mistake of assuming activism only meant going to a rally or going to, like, you really meant the way you take action in all aspects of your life.
Totally.
This is what we're talking about.
Activate. It's all action. Everything you do makes a difference. Everything you think makes a difference. And it's not about doing something that you're like, okay, I'm a Buddhist now, so I'm going to behave like a Buddhist. I'm not talking about that, because that's contributing to the I'm a this and you're a that. What I'm talking about is showing up. I like thinking about it as like viewing everything from the light of your soul. So like even the really shitty times, thinking like somehow this is moving me, like this misstep is leading me to the best version of me. And this painful experience that this person is going through is an opportunity for me to step into the best version of myself. And this incredible opportunity to spend time with family is a great opportunity for me to do this. And this conversation about this asshole who just can't seem to understand that there are people starving in the world and they don't care because as long as they're not affected is an opportunity for me to view it through the light of the soul. And for me, that is, it's so unique to every situation. You know, like, can you find a common ground somehow? Like, that's what we mean when we say be the forklift. It's like moving in at the same level as the person and then lifting them above you. That's what those teachers on the 5-hand did. They didn't come in and say, oh, yeah, you're down there, so let's try and get you up to me. No, they meet you where you are, and that can be hard. Like, try having a conversation about veganism with somebody who is like, I'm going to eat meat every day for the rest of my life, and I don't care about the environmental implications and animals. Like, we are here to control, and we are the best species on the planet, and we are holding, like, animals are here for our use. They're our resources. And then, like, show up and find a way to meet that person where they're at and elevate them. That is fucking hard. And you're going to need a pretty serious meditation practice in order to do that, because the bait is going to be put right out in front of you, and you're going to, and you take it all the time. You know, it's like, oh, you know, fuck you kind of attitude, and then you go, well, I didn't quite get it that time. Whoops. You know, you look at why do we love the Dalai Lama so much? People, you know, why do people love him? Because he's been able to not react, and he's been able to do it where people pay attention. It's not like who and the what in the what country, you know. And some people say, well, you know, if he would have fought back, he would have been crushed. But here we are, we're still aware of it, and let's keep waking up. And now's the time, like we've said, where we need a bunch of Dalai Lamas. We need a bunch of people coming together, and that's why activism is such a great word for it, because it's like coming together and taking action as a collective, but doing it from a very clear spiritual place, rather than from the intellect, or rather than from the navel. Right? If we just do it from the navel, that's where the arms race comes from. Well, as long as we got the guns, man, get out of our way. we're right and you're wrong. Right? I mean, that's the basic human, animal instinct. We got the power, back off. But you're a human being. You're a light mind. You're here with this incredible capacity to create and to feel empathy and to, operate on such a deeper level experientially than that. And you still have that in you. You need it to survive. But that's not who you are. It's a portion of who you are. It's a survival mechanism. It's the same way as this is good and this is bad. But you're able to operate on such a deeper level. And how do you get in touch with that so you don't buy into the arms race, so that you don't buy into the head trip? It comes from intuition. And intuition is developed through meditation, especially things where you're feeling the suffering in the gut, or you're feeling the busyness of the mind, and you can still maintain equanimity. Some yogis say yoga is equanimity. It's like even amongst the alarm going off, beep, 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 like red and anger and alert, you can still maintain equanimity. And you may need to take action from an emotional place, but it isn't driven just by alarm, react, alarm, react. There's a moment there of okay, wait, we got an alarm. Like a good quarterback. Football season starts next weekend, and that's a big thing for me. I love watching football. And one of the reasons why is the quarterback is like the meditative mind. If you have a new quarterback who's not used to playing the game, they get killed out there. They make decisions and everybody sort of suffers as a result, But if you get a guy who's like Aaron Rodgers, I'm not a Packers fan, but he's on my mind because the Seahawks play the Packers in the opening weekend. This guy is a genius. His ability he knows exactly what's going on on the field, who's coming at him. He also knows exactly the time, and he can also tell if there's people coming on and off the field when they shouldn't be. Well, all this is going on, and he's about to get crushed by some 300-pound person. That's the meditative mind in action. That's you talk to athletes who say, great athletes, when they're performing incredibly, they'll say it's I'm not even there. What does she say? To make each day meaningful? Yeah.
Victoria on the Instagram.
Yeah. It's like they say, it's like being in the zone. That's meditation. It's like you're doing some exercise where your arms are killing you and you're doing some crazy breath and your head's telling you that we should stop, because not everybody's going out onto the field and playing in the NFL. But it's a great example of what we're dealing with in the world where we interact with each other. It's like people are out to harm you because they have pain in their lives, because maybe that's their job to do that. You don't know what's going on. And then there's the time clock, and then there's your diet, and then there's your kids need to go to school, and then there's the taxes that need to be paid, and then there's the roof that's leaking, and then there's the da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And a master is like the quarterback going, all right, I see it all. I understand it. I see the right and the wrong. I see the this and the that. I see the dangers. Here's what we need to do first, and then you do it. And then this, and then you do it, and then this. Or people who are great at business do that. We both love Gary Vee. That's the micro speed, macro patience. That's the be aware of everything that's going on. Make sure you don't get sacked. Pay close attention to all the people that are. But if you just do that, you're the lousy quarterback. But the great ones are the ones who, even though you're only there for 2 seconds in the pocket, you see it all. Everything. You see the guy's angry eyes, you see the hand, you see the clock, you see the coach, you see where you are on the field, you see the guy who's going to catch the ball, and then you execute. And that's the action. Right? And that's how we operate. And that's why meditation is so crucial. That's why some of the best coaches in sports implement meditation practices, because they can see that you can learn this stuff. Some people are born a little more natural to it, or they have an expanded peripheral vision, but this is not unique to some incredible athlete. It's available to everybody, but you need to work with it and do it, and then show up and take action in the area that you're meant to. I mean, you have a purpose, we all do, whether it's teaching people about eating a more compassionate diet, or whether it's being a better father than your father was, or whether it's being ethical in business, or whether it's like making a lot of money and giving it to people who can't make money for themselves. Or, I mean, I don't know what that answer is. That's up to you. But that's really what I mean by spiritual activism. It's the ability to see beyond the surface. It's the micro speed, macro patience. It's the, okay, yep, we're busy, we're moving, we're doing it, but I know exactly who I am in relationship to it all. And you can learn that through experience.
I'd like to talk a bit about pain. You mentioned suffering in the navel, not necessarily the busyness of the mind. I think everyone's struggling a lot these days with a very busy schedule. Busy being a swear word, as you've been saying. We're all busy, we know that. But I think there's definitely a segment of listeners, people out there, who have trouble connecting on some of these things because of the pain in their life. What can we say to those people who are using these opportunities as almost, it's not a medicine, but it's like they can't feel good for others because they're having a lot of pain in their life? How can they access some of these things we're talking about? Is it to begin a meditation practice?
Yeah, that's it's the nature of this is that if there's a problem, there's a solution, and you need to just look. In my life, I can look back, and it's not like a conscious thing where I was like, oh, I have a problem, so what's the solution? I mean, we all do that naturally, but I can look back and see the little things along the way, like the markers, like the teacher saying, you should try meditation out in high school. Or the guy along the way, one of my dear friends, the Gaff, this incredible DJ, when I went through a really big breakup in my life, and I was like, do I keep up with these spiritual practices, or do I just like DJ and try and make my money doing that and screw it? Just like what? Like who am I? And him saying like, you got to do both, man. That's who you are. You've got to stay connected to the music, and you need to teach this stuff and practice it. Like, why is that guy in my life at that time? And I listened, and I flip-flopped along the way. But I can see, like, there's always... The fact that you're listening to this right now, it proves what I'm talking about. Because you're paying attention. Does it mean that it's going to be perfect? No, it's not going to be perfect, because it can't be all solution, 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 solution. Because what happens if it's solution, 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 like we talked about previously? Will you grow? Will you evolve? Will you step into your radiance? No. Problem, solution, problem, solution, problem, solution. That's evolution. If you fall into there's only problems, there's only problems, there's only problems, that's de-evolution or devolution. But it's the same on the other way. Life should always feel perfect. There should never be any issues. I should just be happy all the time. I'm not saying that. You know who you are in relationship to your challenge, so you face it with integrity. So you face it with grace. So you face it with, because the nature of nature is we're going to go through change. We have to. It's like part of me goes like, I don't want Marley to go to school. I want her to stay 5 forever. But that's not happening. And I don't actually want that. It's purely for selfish reasons. What do I really want if I look at it from a clear place as the master? I want her to think for herself. I want her to grow into the type of person who challenges authority. I want her to grow into a young woman who really believes in herself and sees herself as strong and beautiful at the same time. I want her to be somebody who isn't defined by her gender, who isn't defined by the color of her skin, her paint job. You know what I mean? Who isn't defined by, oh, she has this job, or she lives where, or she, that's what I want. And in order for her to show up and do that, she's going to have to face some challenges and people who are going to say, like, oh, you can't do that. And ultimately, that's what we want for everybody. So that we can get past the bullshit of talking about paint jobs. And I'm a this and you're a that. And here's the fence and you're on that side and I'm on that. It's like, this is the time of the Aquarian age where we're leaving that shit behind. And some people don't want to leave that shit behind. Because if they do, then they're going to have to give up their power. And there's this song by Mary Gocha, who I love. I play her music constantly in class. She's incredible. She says, people in power will do anything to keep their crown. And so when you start saying, hey, guess what? We are all wearing the crown, which is what the Sikhs did, which is why, it's such a great part of this particular practice, whether you consider yourself a Sikh or not. They said, sorry, everyone wears the crown. Man, woman, Hindu, Muslim, whoever, doesn't matter. We're all royal. Well, if you're not a monarch or in a position of power, you're like, woo, awesome. But if you're in power, if you're the 1%, if you're the corporations that run this whole show, you think you're just going to go like, okay. No, you'll create some kind of diversion. Imagine if you have a house. This is a weird analogy, but let's see what happens. Imagine if you have a house and there's a bunch of children in the house. And you are going to try and keep those children in the house so all the housework gets done and you don't have to do anything, right? So you scare them. You tell them, like Rapunzel, that's how the story in Rapunzel is. You say, like, don't ever go outside. It's really dangerous. If you go outside, all this terrible shit's going to happen to you. There's monsters and there's this and there's that, and, like, never go outside. Don't even open the door. Don't even think about it. But you go outside all the time. You come home, the house clean, no problem. You got it all going on. Well, eventually, somebody in that house is going to go like, hey, you ever been outside? No, we could never. Well, if we never been outside, how do we know? And then they start talking. Oh, okay. This is what happened with Guru Nanak. It's like, just a sec here. Muslims and Hindus? There isn't us and them and that. There's none of that. I had this experience and I saw like we are all one and interconnected. And you can choose to believe whatever you want. And we're being controlled by a government telling us like all this shit to keep us down, right? So they start talking amongst themselves in the house, and you go, oh, you start to catch wind of this. So what do you do to keep them controlled? You don't just open the door because you've gotten so used to the comforts of your life. So you create some kind of issue. So-and-so said something about so-and-so. Or did you know that the kids on the second floor have all of these special things and the kids on the first floor don't have? Can you believe that? And then you find some weak link and you give them some extra little toys and stuff. And then you've got it, everything you want still happening. The people are just arguing and you're sitting going, ha-ha, suckers. And all it takes is for those kids to go, wait a second. If we just ignore who's on the first floor, who's on the second floor, and all of that stuff, and we just go outside, what's the worst that could happen? Let's stick together and see if we can do it. And they all go, what's going to happen to the person in power? They're just going to have to adapt. And that's where we're living now, and that's the activism. That's the take action. But you have to take it from a really clear place. Otherwise, you fall into the people on the first floor versus people on the second floor. It's a simplified
I think it was a strong analogy. I mean, I think you're talking a lot about things that I've enjoyed thinking about, and the danger of mainstream media, the consolidation of corporate media, the 200 executives that decide the diet of our content and media for the entire Western world, and that's a very dangerous thing. As simple as some shows are on TV, there's a powerful agenda behind a lot of this messaging, and if you do pay attention, you do see this very cyclical nature in the news. It's it's this problem, then it's this problem, it's celebrity, it's racism, it's hacking, it just kind of goes around in a wheel, and
Right.
you're constantly in this frenzy of fear, of disconnectedness, of separateness. And I think you summed it up nicely with that analogy that there is power by seeing the brothers and sisters as they are,
Yeah.
and sticking together and making communities and gaining power in a wholesome way,
Totally.
not through these classic traditional means of gun-oriented power and physical, strength, male dominance per se. So I think it's quite interesting what you're saying.
And we need to, there is something to be said. I'm not belittling the struggles of people from, different ethnic backgrounds, or the struggles of people who are, transgendered, or people in the gay communities, or, who have faced oppression and have been persecuted for their, I'm not belittling that.
No,
I'm saying
I'm
acknowledging the reality of it. And I'm also saying, on top of that, I'm saying we also need to create our own culture. We need to acknowledge all of that. But what happens is, with the media machine, like what you're talking about, is it's exactly the analogy where they go, okay, here's what they're arguing about, so let's just throw a couple of things in here so that we can continue what we're doing, But what if we go, okay, yeah, but we're going to just create our own culture. We're not going to listen to you defining to us what that culture is. We're going to make it our own. And that's what happened with Guru Nanak. And that's why people say that Kundalini Yoga is dangerous, because it's saying, well, actually, we're just going to do our own thing because we know who we are in relationship to this. And it still allows you to be unique. It isn't, when we say that we're all one, it doesn't mean like we're all one uniform and we all have to express ourselves exactly the same way. That isn't it. It's saying your uniqueness is an incredible gift and blessing, and you should be allowed to express that in whatever way you want to express it, and let's create our own culture that supports that, because we haven't had that, because we believed in this idea of separateness. As in the old world, there were times like we got 7.7 billion people. Like, it wasn't that long ago when there was 2 billion people, and so now is the great revealing of like, oh, wait a minute, maybe I can trust that person with red hair. Oh, maybe that person who looks this way is total. Oh, maybe you should find out about somebody who's been persecuted for not identifying with their gender or whatever it is. And that's where the danger of the intellect comes in, because we start going like, it's these people, it's them. Those people are causing the problem. Those, it's like, there's some truth to that, but if it only goes to there, it gets stuck in the head. And if it gets stuck in the head, we're going to communicate from our emotions, and that never leads to a place of clarity. It usually makes a big mess, and then we clean it up, and we learn from the experience. But if all we do is make a big mess and clean it up and make a big mess and clean it up, and we're talking about a lot of people, and we're talking about a lot of potential with weapons to cause a lot of pain and suffering, the mess just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Eventually, you'd think we go, I'm kind of tired of making a mess. Like, what if there's room for all of us? What if there is Ekankar? Like one creator, one source that we're all connected to. And what if our whole duty is to show up and have I was listening to Rainn Wilson. You know who that is? He was on, on The Office. He was on Oprah's Super Soul Sunday podcast. It's really worth a listen. Anybody out there, listen to it. It's great. But he said he was raised a Baha'i, so really like open-minded spiritual tradition. And he said, I think ultimately, like, we're here to like have a kick-ass time, and also like learn something about like devotion. And I couldn't agree more with that statement. It's like, express yourself fully. and find something inside of you that you have this like deep, profound, romantic love for you. When you exist in that place, like you're just not going to create a bunch of pain and suffering around you. Like, you're not designed for that. The pain and suffering comes from the resistance when you're not being creative in any way, and you're not being you. You're busy being a whatever. I'm a this, and you're a that, and na. And you hear the sound current of it, right? It's like, da 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 da. Instead of a person who's very creative and very in love with himself, you don't need to express yourself like that. And we fall into it all the time. You know, I didn't get something to eat, and somebody's being a backseat driver in the car, and I'm like, respond from that place and go, oh, excuse me, sorry about that. Because I'm aware of it. Some people aren't aware.
Yeah, it's not surprising that you think about the public system, the educational system. There's awareness there because so much of this has started there. You know, the idea of grades and separation via some very trivial practices. I mean, I know there's definite value to learning some of these subjects, but there's a lot of ones that don't have a lot of value. And then you create these levels, these A+ versus the D student, and you create this early on mentality of, I'm different, I'm not good. And you get into then the more career-oriented years, maybe 16 and up, and you're supposed to plan to be something, be someone or something,
right?
You know, and you have these dangerous labels that you are quickly narrowed into a very small frame of vision of what is life. Creativity is lost so quickly in the pursuit of these labels. Certainly a time to be extremely aware of everything.
Definitely. This is the time where we've discussed this idea that in these days, truth will be what you can convince somebody of.
Great segue. I see SJ talking about the Aquarian Luminosity course. Let's talk about it more. I think it's something substantial that deserves a few minutes for the next few podcasts. I mean, it's such an integral part of what you're teaching now. What is the Aquarian Luminosity course going to be like? What are the benefits people are going to receive? And talk about more of the topics a little deeper, because last episode you didn't share some of the specific topics you're going to talk about.
You know, and Richard, thank you for that, and thank you also, Dharma Temple. I know that's the wonderful SJ keeping us in line on the Instagram. Because it is education, and one of the things that you and I have talked a lot about Dharma Temple and the work that we do is that we want this place to be a place for a new education, a place where, you know, it isn't about doing a yoga teacher training and learning to do some postures. It's about showing up here every day and finding new ways to be a teacher in your life, no matter what your job is.
Let me just hold you right there.
Yeah.
We go by a fundamental saying that you're always the teacher and the student at all times.
Yes, definitely.
So improving your life as a teacher will see impact everywhere in everything you do. And I just don't want people to get thrown off. It's like, well, I don't teach anything.
Yes.
You do.
Everybody is. Everybody's here to teach something, and everybody is here to learn something. And that's exactly what I mean. It's like you show up in this place, and there's interaction between you and the other teachers. And there's interaction with me and you and me as the student and you as the teacher. And we're all in this finding a new way of living where there is no hierarchy. And that's the only way for these teachings we're sharing today to work. We ultimately need to move to a place where there is equanimity, you know? And so basically what we've done is we've gone, okay, so this place is always going to be like that, like a school, Dharma Temple, and these teachings are set up for elevation and healing. Everything we do is, you know, does it elevate? Does it bring healing into the world? That's it. And if it doesn't, we don't do it. We don't touch it. We're not interested, you know. And then the idea is like, okay, so our teacher Guru Singh was saying we need to have 25 million people to create a tipping point in the world who understand these concepts that we're talking about today. And that will create a tipping point where enough people will go, we're leaving the house, to use the analogy from before. That's the tipping point, enough. And that means that community of leadership, not one leader, you know. And you see it, it's happening all over the place. All the podcasts, there's so many great podcasts you can listen to. You know, Guru Singh, Rich Roll, the Oprah one is really good. Somebody just turned me on to another one called, maybe you know, it's called like Life of Charm or something to that effect.
I think I've heard of it.
I was listening to a neurologist. Sorry, if anybody knows what the name of that podcast is, give us a shout out and we'll definitely say it properly. But because I just heard it the other day. But there's just all of this material out there that is going to like inspire leaders. And I kept having people saying like, oh, why don't you do a teacher training? Why don't you do a teacher training? Why don't you do a teacher training? And we've been like, okay, oh, hi, this is a nice surprise. Art of Charm. Yeah. Thank you so much. And I've been kind of like, and I know we talked about it last week, I've been like, well, you know, I don't really believe in like the yoga alliance and here's how you have to submit the book and make sure that there's X amount of poses being taught and this is how they need to be taught. And if they are, then you get the piece of paper to do this. And I just feel like, what is that? Like, do we need that right now? Because like I'm looking around right now and going, I don't think we need that right now. I'm thinking we need some programs that are going to go, no, it's not all about this one lineage. It's not about this one belief system. It's not all about this one teacher. That's not going to work. That's an old way of looking at it. It's knowledge-based. It's Piscean-based. We need to do something that's more experiential, that creates leaders as a collective. And we want strong individuals, because strong individuals will create a strong collective. We don't want strong followers. For what? What good is that going to do? It will die out, you know? And so I started thinking like, okay, and SJ as well, who definitely is such a great help in keeping me focused. You know, we got to have actually think about it. We got to have the divine feminine and the sacred masculine and see it through that balanced lens. So we were thinking, okay, so how do we do this where the people are asking for it? How do we do it where it's like actually going to serve? And we thought, okay, well, we know about all of these handful of teachers analogy. We've done all kinds of practices, Buddhist meditation, Taoist tea practices, Kundalini yoga, Hatha yoga, the study of yoga philosophy, drug addiction, alcoholism, parenting, you know, like all of these facets of our lives. And we go, can't we make like a leadership training where we give like a broad spectrum of all of these experiences and say, hey, this is from our experience how we can show up and lead. Let's do it. Let's go for it together. And the response has been incredible. And I know that by the grace of the Guru and the blessing of our teachers and just seeing what's happening in this community, it's the right thing to do. And a lot of it is through the lens of Kundalini Yoga, because Kundalini Yoga, as you know from listening to these recordings, that all of us who are coming into this place are having more of an experience than just, wow, that was a cool sequence. Like I'm watching people give up drugs, give up alcohol, face cancer, get through really tough breakups, face issues with eating disorders, you know, have the courage to stand up against a family member who caused a lot of harm, face a past of abuse that they were afraid to do. This wasn't happening in my years and years of teaching asana. It just wasn't. It's not that I didn't want that to happen. It's not that, you know, that's just not the way it was unfolding. And then, you know, I made a commitment in my life to stop drinking, and it came through the practice of Kundalini Yoga, and all of these things started shifting where I was like, whoa, I can't just like half-ass it. I can't just kind of go through the motions. I can't. Like it's going to all come crashing down. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to keep up. And since I've been keeping up, it's been unbelievable. And now it's like, okay, this is the next chapter. And so what do you do? And we thought, oh, what do we call it? And I toyed with all the names, and it's Aquarian luminosity. We're sticking with Aquarian luminosity because the Aquarian age is the experiential age. It's like what we're talking about. It's beyond knowledge, and it's keeping your light bright no matter what, even though you're in the darkness, even though you're under the pressure, even though, you know, everybody goes, oh yeah, you know, I know you always do this, or you could never do that. It's like, well, it doesn't matter. I'm just doing it, so you can say what you want. You know, that's to be luminous, to be living from the light of the soul amongst the challenges and the solutions. So that's sort of the rundown of what the course is like, and it will go for 10 months, one full weekend per month. And so basically that will happen over the course of a year. It starts in November and ends at the end of August. And we've already got people coming from different places in Canada and hopefully some from the U.S. So come on out if you're in the U.S. listening to this. I know we've got a lot of people tuning in from L.A. saying, when are you coming to L.A.? And I say, make it happen. But that's the big thing, Richard. It's the importance of what we're talking about here, spiritual activism, and it's making a course because we're so passionate about this that are really going to inspire people to do it. And you said, how can people, like, what do? Do they just start meditating? I don't know. If you're listening to this, sign up for the course. It's like, oh, but I haven't done yoga. I'm not a yoga teacher. It doesn't matter. It's a leadership training. It is not a yoga teacher training. It's for everybody.
I mean, would you also call it a bit of a lifestyle design? I mean, it's so...
Yeah, lifestyle and leadership.
I just want to take a few seconds here and read through sort of the titles that you've set for the weekend, if you don't mind. So first 3 weekends are, you're doing more of the Kundalini yoga. You've got Connect with Your Inner Teacher, Spiritual Practice and Purpose, Consciousness, Creativity, and Community. So those first 3 weekends until January sound very powerful. Then you've got Embracing the Divine Feminine and Sacred Masculine, Yoga Philosophy. Now talk about a bit these two, Eastern mysticism and Western mysticism. How will those sort of shape up for people?
Just pause here for a second. I had to restart the Instagram live, so just want to
no worries.
Get back on there. Sorry about that, guys. We've been just having such a meaningful, heartfelt, beautiful discussion here, so welcome back. Thanks for coming back on. And Ali, you were asking about where to practice in Edmonton, Calgary. I'll write you a message about that. So let's get back to you're asking about Eastern mysticism.
Yeah, what are those topics going to involve?
Yeah, so basically each of the weekends, we're going to teach on things that are important in the evolution of our practices. And for me, like day one, it was the Buddha that inspired me to do what I do, and I speak about the Buddha often, and this gives me a platform to go, hey, here's the practices that I learned from that I think could serve you through the lens of Kundalini Yoga, but also through the lens of 2017, here's what's going on, because there's a lot of wisdom from those traditions that we need to honor, but we also need to come at them from our own way. That's how it works. It's like you pay attention. It's like there's all these signs from the past, and there's all these signs in the present, and then there's all the signs that are present for you through the practice of meditation and intuition, you know? So in my experience, I'm looking for truth everywhere. I'm looking for it, and I'm going, wow, I learned so much from the Buddha, and I learned so much from reading the Tao and reading the words of Lao Tzu, and I learned so much sitting with the tea master. I go to Chinatown and sit with a guy and learn about tea and the way of tea, and I've learned so much sitting in the Gurdwara, and I've learned so much going to the punk rock shows and talking to the vegans and social activists, and I've learned that's just how I've learned about it. And what I hope is that people will get some value from it, which is why they come to class, which is why they tune in on Instagram, which is why they listen to the podcast. And then they'll come and share their experiences of like, here's what we learned and here's how we learned that. And then we just start to grow as this community of strong individuals growing as a strong collective, and that's where the change comes from. So Eastern mysticism is a big one. And I also included Western mysticism because there are people who get into this mentality in the West where they think like, oh, well, I've been so let down by the church and by religion in the West, then only the Eastern answers are the answers. Well, that's only seeing the problem, or that's only seeing the solution, which we've said that doesn't work. You need to be able to look through that. It's not, fuck religion, religion is bullshit, be free, be you. But it is that, but it's not that. And it's not, become a Christian and only follow this one way, and if you don't, then you're going to hell. It's not that either. That's too simplified. Nobody is that simple. It's not like, these are the bad people and these are the good people. Okay, do. I mean, that is not how life works. Look around you. I mean, if you talk to any person who's sitting in a prison cell right now and ask how many of them were abused as children, guaranteed the number is off the charts. It's not going to be like, 5%. It's probably like 90%. And does that mean we say like, oh, well, so you were abused as a child, you can do whatever you want? No, it's not that simple. We try and make things compartmentalized and two-dimensional. Here's the good guys and here's the bad guys. It isn't like that, And in order to see that, we have to look at some of these great masters. Like Jesus was a great one for that. That guy challenged the religious right like crazy and hung with the prostitutes and hung with the people who were considered to be very vile sinners by the religious right, because he's like, this isn't who they are. And then there would be people who were the religious right, who people would say, oh, aren't we against them? And he would say, no, that you're missing the point. The master is the one who can meet anybody at their level, where they're at, whether they're a stripper or a sniper or a kindergarten teacher and see like somewhere, I'm not sure where it got lost, but at the beginning of their life was infinite worth. And somehow along the way, they stopped believing that was true. Somehow. And that's the only reason why we cause pain. You can only hate someone if you feel hate inside you. You can only love someone if you feel love inside of you. And so our job as leaders, which is why as a leadership training, is to give a really broad scope and keep in alignment with our teacher's words, who said, if you can't see God in all, you can't see God at all.
Those are going to be some powerful weekends. And I see right after that, you've got food as medicine. I'm really happy you're going to be bringing in the plant-based mentality into this course. I think any substantial teaching needs to have awareness around food. It's just if you're going to be eating 3 times a day, every single day, you should probably know a lot more about it.
Yeah, well, you're made of earth. You eat the earth. You live on the earth. It's not something that you can just go like, whatever. Or, I'm just going to do whatever I want. We need to see it. This all applies to everything.
Of course.
It's the equanimity. Yeah. It's the oneness. It's the showing up as the teacher in all areas of living. And it isn't about good and bad and us versus them.
And then your last 2 weekends, living in balance with the earth. And then finally, relaxation, ritual, and wisdom.
Yeah, so the last one will be a lot about spiritual activism, the 9th one. And then, which is what we're talking about today. This is like a precursor to it, the pregame show. And then the last one is about ritual practices. The idea here is to teach you how to develop a sadhana of your own so that you can create the mental clarity, the space in your life to show up as you, and then be able to create that space for others to create a sadhana of their own, to make space in their lives for the best version of them. That's what we want. We want that. That's how the world will start to be impacted by this. you know. And then once you've got that sadhana going on and you realize it's not about dogma and it's not about rules and it's not about duality, and you're experiencing that and living it, and then you tell other people how to do it. You do this, and this is when a good time to practice, and here are some different modalities that you could try, and then it goes on and on and on.
You know, it's going to be a good course when talking about the table of contents is quite valuable in itself. I mean, you dropped a few insights there, pretty potent stuff. Guys, if you're more interested in the course, go to thedharmatemple.com. You can find it there. You can also go to thedharmatemple.com/Aquarian-luminosity to go straight to the landing page to get all the info. You can drop a deposit, save your spot. I know it's going to be a pretty exclusive offering, only so many seats available, so make sure you take action on that if you are interested.
Definitely.
There's a place for you to ask questions on the website directly to Tiaga Prem if you're having some questions, concerns, or interests about the course. So make sure you check that out. I really encourage you to do so. My own experience being around Tiaga Prem and SJ has been profound. In the last 3 or 4 months, I've been able to get a lot of clarity in my life about what I want to accomplish. I've been able to, I would say, substantially remove marijuana from my life. I was a pretty regular user before we started spending a lot of time together. I've been able to really shift out of that. I was in a perspective that was really limiting me. I mean, it was functional, but definitely holding me back from being my greatest version. So definitely that happened by spending time at the Dharma Temple. I've been very diligent on my plant-based diet. We stick to it pretty well. We have gotten that under control. So I do definitely support the course, and I want people to know that it will really bring an impact where you need it. Yeah. It's not necessarily going to bring out about the same in each person, I think. I think it's going to meet you where you're at and help you to see
That's the whole idea. It's not a structured thing, and neither is sadhana. Like when we talk about spiritual practice, it is such a unique and individual thing, just like you. Like we've said it before, there's 7.7 billion religions in the world. Like, how could we think that there's only one way? There isn't. But we could take a big look at the whole spectrum, and then we could speak from our own experience, and then we could support each other. Because the idea is that there are practices that you're doing in your life that are keeping you numb or that are making you anxious, and you're doing them without even knowing that. You're experiencing it, but you don't really see like what's causing that. And starting to do some meditation is going to give some insight to go, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I'm, this strain and struggle is coming from, maybe I don't need to take that drug anymore, or maybe this relationship is toxic, or maybe, and for me, it is something that needs to come through experience. And that's why I love meditation. And that's why I love Kundalini Yoga. And that's why I love mantra. But there are so many things. It's like, that's what I think a great teacher does. It's like, oh, okay, well, you grew up around punk rock, I can speak to you in punk rock terms. You grew up around football, I could speak to you in football terms. I want to be able to talk to everybody in some way. It's like there are so many incredible, amazing people that I meet in my life. And if I can find some way to connect with each and every one of them in some way, to serve, to heal, to elevate one of those things, that's what a teacher does. That's what I'm here to do, and I'm so thankful that I get to do it, and I'm so thankful that you get to share that, and you've experienced it. It isn't okay, Richard, well, you would like to let go of this practice in your life that's not serving you, well, then you have to do this, and you have to do it at this time, and there is some of that, but really, who has to do it? You do. And who has to pay attention to what works? You do. Not me. But I can go, oh yeah, I remember when I dealt with la, and then you can kind of find a common ground. Yeah.
Absolutely. I guess that's going to do it for this episode, guys. Pretty powerful ending there. Just talking about the Aquarian Luminosity course. Just a big substantial thing that we're focused on here at the Dharma Temple of serving, making an impact. So think about it. You know, if it's been itching, or if you've been wanting to make some sort of transition, a transcendence perhaps, do not hesitate to reach out to Tiaga Prem, whether that's on Instagram, by email, tiagaprem@thedharmatemple.com. You can even write me, Rich, at thedharmatemple.com, and ask me some questions about my experience here.
Yeah, that's a
great idea. I'd love to
idea.
share with you guys what I've observed and how you can be impacted and served.
Beautiful. I think that is such a great note to end on. And I know next week, guys, those of you who are listening to this, next week we're going to do our summary episode.
I'm going to quiz you on everything.
Yeah, right. Make sure it all aligns.
Yeah.
But that summary episode, those of you on Instagram listening and those of you on the iTunes listening, that's a great opportunity to come with any questions you have. But you could also ask questions about the Aquarian luminosity. That would be kind of a fun way to frame it, because we're going to go into this fall where we're teaching a lot at different festivals and in different places. And then we're going to be deep in the course, and we want you guys to be there with us for that experience. And even if you can't come to Aquarian Luminosity, just bring your questions, because we're going to keep growing and doing this together, and this will be an opportunity to kind of have the kickoff next week for the fall. You know, not only is it the beginning of the NFL season and the beginning of school, but it's the beginning of a big, big time to step up and be a leader and make a shift and a change. And then apply that to all those things that you love. You know, talk about plant-based foods at the football gathering with all the guys. Talk about, you know, different ways of parenting and consciousness in the playground with the other parents. That's how we're living, man. These are the opportunities to show and be the teacher, not hide. Oh, I'm not going to the football game. They only eat meat, and football is like really American, and I don't like that. What good is that doing? Show up, be the vegan there, be the fan, and be the open one who talks to everybody. Oh, really? You're having a blood pressure issue, or you're having a hard time communicating with your wife? Have you thought of doing Kundalini yoga? Then the people go, I talked to this weird guy at the football game, but I think he really was on to something. That's the teacher. The teacher is right there in the marketplace.
Yeah, I think that just one more thing to add, it brings up this idea that when you get into some sort of meditative, spiritual, light-minded lifestyle, that you need to go into these only light-minded areas where it almost is, you go where you've been, where you know people, and you bring the sharing, the teachings there, and you connect where you've always been. I mean, there's both aspects to it, but don't feel like you get to escape necessarily from
you don't
those
need
places,
to.
right?
The only way you need to escape is if you have a habit that's life-controlling and you need to get away for a bit. Yes. I'm not saying like, oh, you need to quit drinking, just go to the bar and white knuckle your way through. Like, I'm saying you might need a break, but I am saying like eventually, or it depends on the circumstance, but for the most part, for the most part, please be in the public eye. Please be watching the football game and the sober one. Please be in the yoga class talking to everybody about, you know, being open and sharing what's happening in your life. Don't just show up and quietly punch in and punch out. Get open, get out there and share, get involved, be active. I think what we should do, Richard, is I think we should maybe close down the iTunes conversation, and then those of you who are on Instagram who have some questions, I'll answer the questions.
Well, we'll call this an episode here, guys. Thanks so much for listening. Tune in with us next week, and we'll catch you then for the summary episode.
Yeah. Beautiful conversation. Thank you, everyone. This means the world to us that you tune in and listen to this. And by the way, just because it's a summary episode, that doesn't mean the end of the podcast. It means the next chapter of incredibly amazing, insightful work with Richie Newrich and Tiaga Prem on Revealing the Diamond. Love you.
Love you guys. Sat Nam.